Welcome to B2B Commerce Corner. Commerce Corner is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast discussing all things B2B commerce through the lens of agencies, consultants, merchants, and more. Enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome our next incredible guest, Mr. Kyler Nixon from Kyler Nixon Consulting. Welcome, Kyler.
Hey, Jason. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. And look, I've been wanting to have this conversation with you for a while now. We're both members of the B2B EA. We both work very heavily in the B2B e-commerce world, working with B2B e-commerce suppliers, sellers, just B2B merchants. They're oftentimes omnichannel, working with manufacturers, working with distributors, working with people that are in the B2B supply chain. And what I love about you, and I told you this off air, what I love about you at the moment is A, you feel like you're everywhere, and I love that. B, it feels like you're really establishing a pretty tight niche for yourself around marketing in particularly wholesale distribution and particularly mid-market and smaller distributors that are they're not billion-dollar distributors, right?
Yeah.
They might not even be $100 million distributors. They might be $50 million distributors. And what I have found, and I'd love your take on this, what I have found in all the clients that I work with, and I don't offer marketing services like you do, I offer tech and ops consulting, org design, process design, data design, technical architecture, platform search and select. That's my specialization, but I don't offer any marketing services. But one of the challenges I see traditional marketers have in the B2B world is that in the B2B world, we're marketing to an account, not a person, not a single individual. And we're trying to personalize at the account level, not the person level. And that becomes a real challenge because people assigned to an account or within an account, they come and go, right? So I might have a buyer on an account and they might be with that distributor for 6 months, but then they might disappear and be replaced by somebody else. And so the account remains, but the people operating in that account may change over time. And so I think that is probably the single biggest challenge I see in the market is a lack of understanding of account-based marketing. And then the second big knowledge gap or understanding gap I see is that most distributors that I work with, first of all, they're usually manufacturers and distributors because very few distributors are just distributors. But the second thing
is a whole
is
other conversation, by the way. We
could spend hours talking about that. But the other thing is 99% of the clients I work with in the distribution space, they don't have a marketing team. They don't have a head of marketing. They don't have a marketing manager. They don't have a marketing director. They got sales and rev ops, but they don't have marketing as a practice inside the business. So I'd love your take on those two things, which is that marketers don't understand B2B and B2Bs don't understand marketing often.
Yeah, that's probably the single biggest hurdle for folks that have B2C ecom experience and think I can just translate it to B2B, especially for these smaller brands, because there is some overlap with D2C principles, and especially the smaller you get, the closer you probably are to some of the D2C stuff. And I know you and I have gone back and forth on LinkedIn about what is a B2B ecom, and I love those conversations. But I think that's probably the biggest hurdle. And so then you have folks who enter the B2B ecom space, whether intentionally or on accident. They've never actually worked in a B2B ecom brand, whether it's a distributor or a manufacturer. And so they don't understand things like ERP. They don't understand things like account-based marketing or organizational hierarchy and some of these other things that we deal with. And so I think that's definitely the biggest challenge that I see on the first part of that is that marketers don't understand B2B. And I think that's accurate. And even for me, I worked a little bit more in the D2C space. I accidentally stumbled into this B2B ecom thing, took a job as a chief revenue officer at a B2B ecom distributor, smaller family-owned company. And my first month, I was like, I've never even heard any of these terms. But over the last 2-3 years that I did that, like now I have the base, like I understand the challenges and I can get that. And so I think that's a huge challenge that if you've never actually worked in a B2B brand, especially commerce brand, like you're going to really struggle to speak the language. And I think you probably know this better than anyone. You can suss those people out really quickly because it's, I wouldn't say it like that, or that phrase doesn't make any sense in this context. But I definitely think that gap of not understanding account-based marketing and not understanding the relationship between, we called it parent and child at our company, same concept, is a huge issue. The second thing that I see related to your question, and I love B2B ecom because it is such a spectrum. Like in D2C, it's a little more defined. You have the big retailers are similar to the small brands, and the principles are scalable. The thing I love
And
B2B
sorry,
ecom,
and also
you're
sorry
good.
to interrupt you, but also the
You're good.
systems are
Yes,
more
very
are
similar.
similar too. A huge multi-$100 million retail brand
Correct.
might be using Klaviyo.
Correct.
Might so a small D2C brand might also be using Klaviyo, for
Correct.
example.
Yeah, absolutely. Or Shopify, or
Yeah.
pick your tool. And within B2B, it's much broader. And so the thing that I've talked about, our mutual friend Justin King and Jay Schneider and some of these other guys that you know and have had on the show, like the thing that I see with that spectrum is there's one end of the spectrum that's adoption. And it doesn't really matter the size of the company. I think the bigger brands, the Grangers of the world, they deal with adoption, right? Trying to get more people to use their e-com self-service platform. But then you also have this other end of the spectrum, which is acquisition. Like these are brands that have been online. They were first movers. Most of their revenue already flows through their e-commerce platform. They understand the principles of e-commerce, right? They were leading the charge 10, 15, 20 years ago. And now they're sitting there, shoot, my model doesn't work anymore, but I have all this great revenue flowing through my e-commerce platform. How do I actually grow? And that's where I spent my time was 70-80% of our company's revenue flowed through our e-commerce platform, right? We had a big marketing team and a small sales team, the inverse of what I think most people have. And our challenge
Yes.
was acquisition. We had to retain customers and then we had to get new customers. And so again, I think that's the other gap is where do you sit on that spectrum is going to determine if you're investing in marketing or if you're investing more on the technical side of things.
And to your point, I see that, again, 95% of my wholesale distribution customers have a gated experience. You can't
Yeah.
you can't see the catalog, you can't see pricing, you can't see inventory, you can't see anything
Mm-hmm.
until you authenticate or until you
Yeah.
apply for a credit account and get
Sure.
a login. You can't see anything.
Yeah.
And I like to tell my distribution customers, if your customers or if potential customers can't see your catalog, neither can Google. And so
Mm,
the reality is you're not going to be able to do effective digital customer acquisition if Google doesn't even know you exist. It means and for that matter, ChatGPT doesn't know you exist
sure.
either.
Sure. Yeah.
Then it means you are not going to be able to do digital customer acquisition at scale. You're
Correct.
not going to get the benefit. And some of these distributors, they got a million SKU catalog. The
Yeah.
long tail that they could get in terms of organic reach would be phenomenal
Huge.
if they ungated their experience. And I tell them,
Right.
look, if you're afraid of showing pricing, if you're afraid of showing inventory, just hide that. Don't hide
Sure.
the whole
Sure.
catalog. Just make it so that you can't see pricing and inventory until you authenticate.
Yeah.
That's fine. But at least get the product information out there. Because if I'm a B2B buyer, I'm not waiting for a distributor sales rep to knock on my door. I'm going
Mhm.
to usually, if I'm looking for a new supplier of widget X, I'm going to go to Google or I'm going to go to
Correct.
ChatGPT and I'm going to go supplier widget X,
Right.
distributor widget X, wholesaler widget X.
Yep.
I'm going to go and I'm going to start my supplier search
Yep.
online. It's
Absolutely.
increasingly unlikely that I'm going to wait for a distributor to knock on my door, or it's
Yeah.
increasingly unlikely that I'm going to go to a trade show
Yeah.
or that I'm going to go to
Or
some
get a
sort of
big, thick
industry.
catalog that gets
Yeah,
mailed to me every quarter or whatever. Yeah.
it's increasingly unlikely. And I'm
Yeah.
sure you know the statistic that 71% of B2B buyers now in the United States are millennials and Gen Z. And increasingly, that means that buying demographic has changed and they expect to be able to engage with you
Yeah.
digitally. And have you
Yeah.
seen that evolution too?
Absolutely. I feel like in a lot of ways, and this just keeps getting confirmed, but I feel like B2B ecom is where D2C was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I don't mean that in like a disparaging way. It's just kind of the reality of the fact that it's this huge complex beast for most brands. But there was a lot of that hesitation as well, right? When it was like, why would I go buy that online? I can just walk into the store and get it, right? And now I don't have any stats off my head, but I'm sure a vast majority of transactions occur online. Go to any local mall and you'll find it empty most of the time. And so I think that's the shift that we're seeing in B2B ecom is people moving into that and having greater expectations. I also think that we're moving away from kind of the golden era of customer acquisition, which was go pump some money into Facebook ads and you can grow your business, go mail physical catalogs and you can grow your business. And then the other thing that I see a lot, especially with smaller kind of legacy distributors, is this endless aisle, sell thousands of SKUs, don't really care how much value they add to the business. It's just I can add as many products as I want because it's an e-com platform, right? Whether I'm drop shipping or inventorying them. And so I think all of those are all just symptoms or hangovers of the same issue, which is that so many of these brands, even if they have been online for a minute, have not evolved into, okay, they want a great experience. They probably want a tighter assortment. They want you to help guide them through the buying process where they can engage with a person when they want it, but they may not want a person through the entire buying process. And I think that's all been something that a lot of distributors, specifically manufacturers too, have struggled to keep up with and have struggled to see that transition coming. I think that they just think, let's just keep pumping money into Facebook or Google Ads or catalog like it's 2019 and see success. And it's just not happening.
I'd love your take on the immaturity level of certain distributors around the ideas that have become very mature in the B2C and D2C world around bundling, kitting, unique SKU assortments, curation. I feel like many distributors still haven't got the memo yet that you shouldn't be selling SKUs, you should be selling solutions.
Yeah.
And that's another way that you're actually able to differentiate and add value is instead of just saying, I got a million SKUs available for you to buy. No, for a specific application or a specific implementation, hey, we've got project management services. Hey, we've got field services. Hey, we've got design services. Hey, we've got these services, and we have packaged solutions that go into specific. I was working with a huge distributor recently in the hygienic pumping and plumbing space. And so they have a full design team. They got a project management team. They got field services. And so if you're setting up a new brewery, for example, they will sell you, they will design the stainless steel fermentation tanks, the pipes, the pumps that you need, the ball valves. They will design basically your entire infrastructure for your brand new brewery that you want to stand up. And it all has to be hygienic end to end. They have those services, but then they're going to sell you an entire package of products. So they're not trying to sell you a single pump. They're not trying to sell you a single ball valve. They're trying to sell you an entire solution. And I feel like some distributors haven't really realized yet that their unique industry knowledge sets them up to uniquely sell total solutions in a way that a standard B2C retail aggregator would really struggle to do.
Yeah. I think there's two primary reasons for that. And I will say, like, some of the smaller distributors, that is a big hurdle. Like, I get why they don't do some of that, but the concept of, okay, even if we don't design the brewery, we can provide all the products that you would need and it's curated, and that's like manageable. That's not a hard, I don't think is not a hard task. But I think there's two reasons for that. And you actually see this most exposed when you compare to some of the newer distributors that are coming onto the scene over the last 10 years. One is that these legacy brands have historicals that they cling to like it's their life. Like, they're unwilling to cut categories or move out of certain things that they're doing because it's X dollars in revenue. And maybe it's a big number, like, just to be fair. But in doing that, it's like sinking your business. Like, you're sinking resources into it. You're sinking time into it. Your customers who buy those products don't buy anything else from you. But you have this historical that you're like unwilling to let go of. The newer B2B e-com distributors don't have the historical. So they're like not having to hit this comp or hit this number. Like, they just add it if they need it and they cut it if they don't. The second thing is that I think the legacy distributors have such a great supply chain or operational process that's actually a hindrance for them. They have all this warehouse space. They've got a great fulfillment team. They've got all these kind of things that actually make it too easy for them to add product. And so therefore, it's just taking up 100 square feet in the warehouse. Who really cares, right? It's taking up a few tiles on our site. Who really cares? And so the ease of use and the historicals, I think, make it really challenging for these legacy brands to be willing to say, we're not going to do that. And instead, we are going to do this. And instead of focusing on something and getting really good at it, they end up really spreading themselves thin and nothing is actually working super well.
I think you've just described in the most perfect way possible the concept of opportunity cost. Because there's an opportunity cost associated with everything. And so the reality is, if your buying demographic is changing and the products and categories they're buying from is changing, and your highest value customers are almost exclusively buying off of a certain set of categories and the
Yep.
other ones are not, then you have to change something, whether it's eliminating categories, whether it's reducing the SKU count within those categories, whether it is saying, if you buy from these categories, you're not going to have a named account manager, you're going to go through customer service, or
Sure.
you're going to only have self-service available to you. So I think there are many levers you can pull as a distributor to de-emphasize underperforming categories or products or customers. I think there's lots of ways you can do that in order to incentivize the right behavior by the right customers. And I think that's really the key here. And I think there's another thing that many distributors miss an opportunity or miss a trick on, which is that they assume, hey, if I have a customer that's buying off of me via EDI, or if I have a customer that's buying off of me via integrated e-procurement with an e-procurement system, then they don't really need a portal. That couldn't be, in my experience, further from the truth, because those customers that transact via those automated channels, they still want to be able to log in, see what you sell, see what inventory you got in stock, see what their pricing is. They still want to be able to log in and place quote requests. They still want to log in and track their orders. They still want to log in and check the status of their credit account. They still want to have all these digital services beyond the transaction. And I think a lot of distributors are missing out on that opportunity to extend those digital services other than the transaction, other than the buy button.
Yeah. I think you're right. I don't really have much to add to it because I think you're summarizing what that issue is. Even for us, like in these smaller distributors, especially some of those that are using Punch Out or e-procurement, some of those are their biggest customers. And most of the distributors don't have thousands of Punch Out customers. They might have 5, 10, maybe 20 really good customers. And it always is baffling to me why you wouldn't really invest in taking care of those customers and help get them into other product lines. So I think you summarized that challenge and opportunity really well.
And when you go in and you're talking to some of these mid-market distributors for the very first time, and maybe they have no marketer in the business, or maybe they have a marketer, a marketing manager, or a body in the business that, oh, Bob, Jane, they deal with all our marketing stuff, or they deal with all our merchandising stuff, or they deal with whatever. They deal with email, whatever it is. When you first get in there, is there sometimes a resistance to becoming a demand-led business instead of a lead-driven business? Because this is something I see all the time where marketers are relegated. Oh, go and get us more leads. Go to trade shows. Go and just get us a bunch of leads that you can dump onto the sales team, and we'll make every effort to close those opportunities. Whereas I feel like the more mature distributors treat marketing as hand in glove with sales. And it's no, we're actually out there trying to generate demand to where by the time they get to you as the sales rep, you're making almost zero effort to close that opportunity because they're ready to buy. You're just the one that's facilitating it.
Yeah. That is the model where I have a little bit more experience. So like we talked about that spectrum. And so I think that the distributors that I'm working with and to work with are a little bit further down that maturity scale where they are a little more marketing led. Now, there's other issues there because they're not great at that. Like they're maybe have a heavy marketing team, but they're not great at marketing, just to be clear. But I do think that they are responsible for demand gen the further kind of down that path that they go. And again, that's often because they have had an e-com platform for 10 or 15 years, or they used to mail a physical catalog. They understood in the early 2000s that was not going to be the model going forward, and they started to pivot. And so I think that's where I tend to see a little bit more of a challenge. But the biggest challenge that I see within that group is they don't understand some of the core principles of marketing. And so there's actually an opportunity to take a page from some of these B2C, D2C brands. The folks that I interact with are very operationally driven. Every marketing decision is just a spreadsheet. There's no differentiation. There's no understanding of brand. There's no understanding of messaging. There's no understanding of how are we making this customer's life better? How are we enhancing that account? What are some unique ways that we can reach these customers in alignment with sales? So I think that's where I see the opportunity. And again, those are the folks that are a little bit out front of where I think the industry is as a whole. But there's tons of those customers. I have a CRM full of 100 customers that probably fit that, or potential prospects that potentially fit that definition. So that's typically where I'm seeing it, is they know they need to acquire new customers, and they typically don't have the in-house expertise to make that happen.
And in those slightly more mature customers that are a little bit further down the demand generation curve, do you still find resistance to marketing ops from sales leaders? Because oftentimes they feel like I see two different attitudes prevailing. One is sales teams can often, or sales managers or sales directors can oftentimes view marketing as doing their bidding, so to speak, where they're an extension of the sales team to a
Sure.
degree, or the other direction where they see marketing as as almost a threat to their existence, where they go, geez, if we get really good at this digital marketing thing,
We won't
then
need
maybe
to,
they have maybe they have no need for us anymore. If we're doing all of our customer acquisition digitally, and we're onboarding customers digitally, and we're assigning them price lists and credit accounts digitally, and we're doing kind of everything digitally, where do I belong?
Yeah. Yeah, that's super fair. I think when we talk about the D2C to B2B jump, but I also think that there's
Yes.
an opportunity to take a page from B2B SaaS as well in this world. And I think that they certainly haven't figured it out. They have their own challenges, and that's its own beast as well. But I think that's the model that I see some of these more mature companies moving into, which is, I was a chief revenue officer. That title is very weird in a B2B. It's very
Yes.
abnormal. Most people have not, they're like, what, you can do that? What does that even mean? But it's very common for B2B SaaS, right? Where
Yes.
marketing, product, and sales all ladder up to the same role. And so I think that's going to take a lot of massaging. And I think we're probably 5 to 10 years behind that actually taking shape. And at that point, the title is probably going to change to some other frou-frou-y name. But I think the idea of marketing, sales, and service all being aligned under the same umbrella, I think is going to be really important. And obviously, that's how I spent a vast majority of my time trying to do that. But I think where companies go wrong, even if you don't have the resources to make that happen, or you don't have the staffing to make that happen, where they go wrong is they have misaligned incentives between marketing and sales. And so what I see most common, marketing probably is going to drive a majority of the volume, simply because it's just easier to reach more people digitally than a sales rep making 50 calls a day. But then you have the sales rep who gets penalized when marketing drives one of their accounts to purchase, right? Where they don't get the commission from it. And then you have marketing who doesn't get credit, or gets slapped on the wrist, or whatever term you want to call it, when sales goes out and gets their own customers and they say, marketing, go get more of these. It's that only happened because that person was pounding the pavement and knocking on the door. So I think the opportunity is really to have the C-suite and the executives of the company get really clear on who we're trying to reach and the product assortment to do that. And then marketing and sales have to work hand in hand, whether they report to the same person or not, to say, this is our role, this is your role, and we're all moving in the same direction. I had a post on LinkedIn. I was being a little tongue in cheek when I said I don't think marketing and sales need to be aligned, because I actually don't know if I believe they should, but they definitely need to have that handoff down, where marketing says, I'm handing you a lead, I'm excited about it. Sales says, thank you, I appreciate the work you did. And then marketing turns around and says, thank you, I appreciate the work you did to close it. Like, to me, that's a really healthy ecosystem for these brands. And I think that's the next evolution for some of these mature distributors, is finding that balance between those two teams.
But I think as long as leadership incentivizes every in the right ways, that feels like a relative, because when I see misalignment, it's all down to incentives, right? Our friend Jason Hine is a fan of saying that sales reps are coin operated. That's the way they work, right? They're a coin operated resource. They're incentivized totally by the commercials, right?
Yeah.
And so if you want them to do the right thing, you have to incentivize them properly. And sometimes when I'm brought in to consult to these distributors, and they can even be huge distributors, they will initially, when they talk to me, especially if it's the leadership that's talking to me versus the sales teams that are speaking to me, they'll say, what do you think about us effectively saying we're going to either cut commission or eliminate commission for all sales that come through digital channels, because those are the most efficient channels for us, and therefore they're usually the most efficient channel for the customer to make the purchase through too.
Yeah.
And so therefore, because those are automated purchases where the sales rep didn't necessarily have any hand in securing that specific order, then I just tell them, then what you're going to find is you are going to find that your salespeople will do backflips to keep their customer portfolio out of your digital channels. They will say, oh, don't bother logging in. It's a really hard to use the platform. Just give me a call. I'll take care of it for you. So you get this perverse situation where you can spend all this money on a digital solution, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, on a digital solution and it sees no adoption because you need your sales team to assist with the adoption because they got the long-term relationship with the customer. They need to sit alongside them.
Correct.
They need to onboard them into the platform. They need to maybe sit alongside them while they do their first 1, 2, 3 purchases through this digital channel and step them through all the other digital services we have available through these portalized experiences. And I tell you, it is so short-sighted. I feel like some of these distributors are cutting off their nose to spite their face. And I say you should be going the other direction. If you want to see massive adoption of your digital channels, then add an additional incentive for named accounts that move and migrate their orders from manual processes to digitalized automated processes. Freaking add incentives to that. If you really want that to happen, if that's actually a priority for the business, then you have to, you get what you incent, is the famous saying I use.
Yeah, it from an executive standpoint, and I sat in these meetings, just to be clear, I get the logic of why you think we would get that order anyway, or the salesperson didn't touch that order or whatever. But like you said, it creates this massive gap where I'm going to go call my best customers and say, call me, don't place the order on the site sucks. I can get it to you fast, whatever they're going to make up because they're, like Jason says, the coin operated or whatever. And so that definitely is a major challenge. I think one thing we did right when we built our sales team, and we had one person when I started and 5 or 6 when I left, was we never touched that. Like we didn't, like if it happened online or if it happened offline, it didn't matter. That rep got approval for that. And I think one maybe I don't know if misunderstanding or misperception or something along those lines that these executives have is that's probably true that the sales rep didn't do anything if you're thinking about it at the contact level. But again, they need to be thinking at it at the account based level. I had a sales rep who closed a killer deal for us. It was a big account, nationwide company, and they had 100 plus locations. He didn't touch every single one of those locations, but he did work the parent account like crazy, got this huge deal. It's like, I can't fathom him not getting credit for all these little smaller accounts that got set up through this deal. But that's, I think, a case of misunderstanding that you're actually going after accounts. And in doing so, you're going to have a lot of orders and a lot of contacts that never touch your sales rep. And that's actually a good thing. Like it's a good thing for the business, and it's a good thing for the sales rep, and it's a good thing for marketing or whoever owns the e-com platform.
And I think, to your point, maintaining a good relationship with the master account, the parent account, if I am freed up instead of receiving all these POs via email that I have to manually key into my ERP system as a sales rep, which is a total zero value add. There's zero value add to that. And having to send them a PDF of a catalog, or having to receive a digital quote request via email that's an attachment, and having to process that and send them back a proper quote that then gets signed off. Like that manual exchange of documents is such a non-value add, both for the rep and for the customer. I would much rather my reps taking them to Friday afternoon drinks at a cafe. I'd rather them taking them to the local ball game. I'd rather them schmooze and build the relationship and solidify the relationship. Exactly. Than processing an order or processing a quote request. And I think, again, this goes back to the short-sightedness of some of these businesses where we're trying to create as much CLV as we can. And if we can land and expand within an account without increasing the admin overhead to our business, then that's a massive win for us, and it's a massive win for the customer.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I do think that one mistake that I'm seeing more regularly, especially in more marketing demand-driven organizations, is the sales team is largely, I'm not trying to say this in a disparaging way toward anyone, but it's going to come across that way. They're essentially varsity customer service reps. They're inbound salespeople. They go cherry pick deals that there might be more meat on the bone, that they're only buying one product and they should be buying 10 from us. And they're effectively just trying to retain their way to growth and grow these accounts 5, 10, 20% year over year. And there's a place for that, just to be clear. If you're driving a lot of customers and a lot of orders, you absolutely need to have somebody kind of farming and cultivating within your house file. But then I see no one on the sales team is doing true outbound, go get new, go hunt for great deals, go knock on doors. And that's to be fair, is like a skill we're losing that, I think, in society anyway. But that's why it becomes even more important to have a true outbound. My job is to acquire great customers, and I actually don't need marketing to do anything other than maybe give me some good enablement documents. And I don't see a lot of distributors doing a great job with that. And I think, again, it's a symptom of marketing getting more expensive. They're still latching on to the marketing of 2015 to 2020, 2021, thinking they're going to come to us because we're pumping all this money into marketing. And then we got a nice little inbound sales team that goes and grows those accounts. That model doesn't work anymore. And they're thinking
Yes.
it does. And I think that's another huge miss for distributors.
I think where, to your point, where marketing still is valuable, even in that true hunting environment, where I think of it almost like a military operation, right? I think of air power coming in. Marketing is the air power. They're dropping the bombs. They're softening the installations. They're identifying weaknesses. They're softening up where the ground troops are going to land.
Yeah.
They're pounding that and they're softening that up and getting it ready for the ground troops to come in and take over. And I feel like marketing is somewhat like that. They, first of all, they can give a hyper qualified list of target accounts for those sales reps to go out and hunt.
Yep.
2, they can soften those accounts up by making sure that content has been in front of them before they ever knock on the door, that they're aware of who we are, that they're aware of what we sell, they're aware of our special expertise and capability and depth of stock holding and pricing, that we're on their radar already before I go and knock on the door. So it's, instead of it being a total cold call, it is now a slightly warmed up call at the very least. So I feel like even in that scenario, it's still marketing and sales working hand in hand, even in a pure hunting scenario.
No, I absolutely agree. This is an easy example just because everyone will resonate with this. Grainger, within the last year or two, has started running what I would refer to as top of funnel video ads. So like you probably see them everywhere. If you've been on their site for 2 seconds, you're getting targeted. I'm seeing them on sports games and all kinds of stuff. Those ads are not, they're ads. That's what they are. They're video ads, the brand, and for the ones who get it done, and they do that tagline, it talks nothing about the value add that they provide in this product or that product. And I don't even know if they show that many products in the video, but it's a brand reinforcement tool. And not that Grainger needs brand awareness necessarily, but what I'm sure that does is if that contact who's going to get cold called by a Grainger outside sales rep has seen 5, 10, 15 of those commercials, I call you, oh yeah, I was just thinking about you guys. Why? Because marketing has been softening that relationship and building the brand over time. So you have an affinity for the brand before they even call. Distributors definitely don't get that. Like smaller distributors don't get that. That's why they lean into performance marketing. That's why everything is bottom of funnel. We talked about
it's direct response, right?
It's direct response.
It's all direct response.
Yeah. There's no brand. There's no relationship. There's no value that's being added. It's all completely dependent on, let me capture that person at the point of buying, which is becoming incredibly expensive and incredibly challenging for these brands. And that's the thing that I'm most worried about, is they just don't see that happening. And instead they just slowly atrophy to death over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah. And I think to your point, even some distributors have not even got to the point of considering direct response anyway. Like a lot of them, they're not running paid and performance marketing of any description. They're relying 100% on the hunting of their sales reps and maybe CSRs or BDRs, BDMs or whatever. And so they are completely in the dark about how some of these channels that are traditionally thought of as D2C or B2C channel marketing channels, they don't even think that can be leveraged in the B2B world at all.
Right.
And I think that's a huge, yes, sure, the CAC is going to be high through those channels. We know that, but oftentimes I find that paid and performance actually is better for B2Bs because by definition, high CLVs and high AOVs are built in to those B2B relationships. Whereas CAC, that's super high CAC in the B2C and D2C world where you're lucky to get a single transaction out of a customer. It's harder to justify that expenditure and that investment. But in the B2B world where high AOVs and CLVs are the norm, it almost works better in some respects in the B2B world, but they're just not even aware that it's even a possibility.
Yeah. The other issue relating to that, though, is what we talked about 10, 15 minutes ago around if your assortment sucks and you have products in your assortment that attract the wrong new customer, you're going to spend $50, $100, maybe even $200 to acquire that customer. But then you're getting the wrong new customer in the door. You're selling them unprofitable products. So that's why everything has to work together. But I absolutely agree. I can come across like I bash on performance marketing, but I agree with everything you said. The way that I want to do it, though, is profitable or new customer focused and not just blowing money and spreading out your marketing funds like peanut butter. I think that's a terrible approach. That's what most people do. But I absolutely agree. If you're a distributor or a manufacturer, you've never run Google ads, maybe you're not capturing email prospects that visit your website, you're leaving tremendous amounts of money on the table, especially if you're in an industry that's not that competitive, because you can actually
Yes.
dominate, you can stay in front of people, and you can use those performance marketing channels to your advantage because you've already built a successful business organically or with outbound, and inbound and demand gen is actually going to be easier for you, I think, than the inverse. So definitely a real challenge.
And I'd love your take on marketplaces for distributors. And the reason I ask that question is because according to DC360 data and many other data sources that back this up, marketplaces are still and have been for like the last 5 years the fastest growing channel, not just digital channel, the fastest growing channel, full stop, for distributors in the world. And this is in every region, not just the United States. And I think a lot of distributors are afraid that the marketplace will ultimately end up being the distributor, and that those marketplaces will establish 1P relationships like Amazon does with certain manufacturing brands, and that they will ultimately be cut out of the loop while the marketplace leverages their sales data to basically weaponize against them and cherry pick the products and categories that are going to be the most performant, right? So they feel, but I guess D2C and B2C brands have been dealing with this double-edged sword for years, and it really just comes down to what is the value add that to my way of thinking, and I'd love your take. My way of thinking is, what is the value add that a distributor brings to the table beyond just simply having a product in a warehouse somewhere that they can have access to? It feels like they're going to have to really double down on their differentiating factors, and they're going to have a differentiating factor to begin with. Otherwise, yes, they are going to get swallowed up by 1P relationships between marketplaces and manufacturers.
Sure. Let's rattle off all the issues that brands have with selling on marketplaces. You have lower margin. You don't have visibility into customer data. You don't know if it's a consumer buying your product versus a business, again, if it's Amazon or depending on the relationship there. Inventory can be a mess when you're trying to track it out of your primary warehouse and then FBA or whatever else through Amazon or any other marketplace. Amazon, and I'll just keep using them because everyone's familiar, they could rip off your product and just go start selling it direct. If you run out of inventory, then now all of a sudden you're back at the bottom of the queue. There's like, you have to know how Amazon works. Now it's another PCP channel for us if you're doing performance marketing. So there's
what you have to do nowadays.
You have to manage product data in an entirely new place, right? On Amazon, which they have their own kind of things for A+ content. And again, this applies to Zoro or any other marketplace out there, just to be clear. Those are super valid concerns. The thing that I look at is, and this is maybe a little bit bold, and you can tell me that I'm full of crap and I'm actually okay with that. I think the distinction between distributor and manufacturer in, I'll say 20 years just to be safe, is probably going to be non-existent, because manufacturers are going to start selling direct. They're already doing that. And distributors are going to have their own, branded lines to be able to compete. So I think that line is going to really blur for most of these distributors and manufacturers. To answer your question a little more directly, if you have all these constraints and you have all these issues with selling on marketplace, what's the actual advantage? In my opinion, it's growing your brand on those marketplaces, putting out a great product in front of them. That's, by the way, more margin rich because it's your own brand. And then hopefully, which I've seen this happen, I have anecdotal evidence, maybe not much analytic evidence, they will come back and buy that product directly from your site. We had a client who was buying tons and tons of our product on Amazon. Then they called us 6 months later and they're like, I realized I was buying this on Amazon and I figured I could probably get a better price just ordering it from you. So here I am. And it's a business, like a huge business, right? It was a procurement person in a business who ordered from Amazon. I agree with the hesitations. I understand all the issues. If you're selling other people's brands as a distributor on Amazon, I think you're probably wasting your time. Get while the getting's good if you can, but just know that you probably can't forecast that into next year's numbers, because it's probably a 12-month shelf life on that product. And then, the manufacturer's going to get wise to you doing it and be like, why are we not doing this? Right. All of that stuff. But if you are going to sell on a marketplace, I think it needs to be your brand. I think it needs to be meant to grow your brand. And I think it needs to be something that you can't count on as a huge profit center, but that's not really the sole focus of those platforms anyway. I do think it's really smart, though, to show up there 50 something percent of searches start on Amazon for the average consumer.
Yes.
And so it's stupid to not be in the world's largest marketplace, if nothing else, than to just be where people are. So that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I don't carry super strong opinions about it. And there's other Kara Babb, you had her on. She's much smarter than I am about Amazon and things like that. But that's my gut reaction and how we tried to approach Amazon in-house.
First of all, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that you've nailed it. And in fact, as I said earlier in the discussion, I have yet to work with a distributor that doesn't have at least a portion of their catalog that is their product. Like 10 to 20, maybe up to 30% of the catalog is theirs. And then 60, 70, 80% is their distributor for those products. And again, I go back to the point where the reason that they do that is not just to have better margins on the products they manufacture, but also to be able to go to market with an entire solution package, as opposed to, hey, we're selling these 100,000, 200,000, million individual SKUs that we're trying to market and sell to an individual customer. No, hey, we're trying to go to market with an entire solution. And oftentimes their field services or whatever thing they add on top, maybe it's warranty service, maybe it's whatever, the services layer oftentimes is where the real fat is, where the real money is, where the product is really just a gateway drug to interfacing with that distributor to begin with, because they've got all these other services that they'll sell you that are ultra high margin, and maybe their net margin on the physical products is 3%, 4%, something like that, where the margins are real bad on the physical goods, but it's all the other stuff they wrap around that makes the LTV ultra high for a customer that becomes a long-term client of the business. And that feels a way forward that is actually sustainable for mid-market distributors.
Sure. Yeah, I think so, especially if you don't have a brand or a product that you can dominate in it, where that's a super broad term. And there's certainly industries where that's possible and not possible. Uline comes to mind with some of the packaging material. Like, good luck. You got to have a really unique way of approaching packaging to compete with Uline. But for other industries, if you have a branded line or you have products that are really well known, that are you're truly building a brand as a distributor. And even if you can't get to the level of providing services, or if it doesn't make sense, then you at least have something to stand on. Like, you at least have some dog in the fight, as opposed to just getting run over by selling everyone else's product. But I love the idea of moving into services. Products become irrelevant at that point from a margin standpoint. And I definitely see a lot of other folks moving in that direction for sure.
Love it. When you first go in and you're working with a client for the very first time, I'm guessing that you do some form of an audit. Okay, what is this business doing today from a total marketing spectrum perspective? Are they doing email marketing, or are they just having their account managers sending one-off individual emails to their portfolio clients based on new drops or based on stuff they think their customer, their account named customers are going to be interested in? Okay, cool. They do no paid in performance. They do no holistic account-based email or SMS marketing. They do. I'm guessing that when you go in, it's let's get the lay of the land first and see who's even involved in any of these marketing related activities. Because oftentimes some of it's done by customer service and some of it's done by account managers, and it's spread hither and yon all over the business. And there's no kind of cohesive plan associated with this. So when you go in, is it a case of, hey, let's do an audit. Let's see where you are. Let's see where you want to get to. And let's see the best both strategic and tactical means and channels of actually bridging that gap.
Yeah. So just to be super clear, I transitioned out on my own at the end of 2024. So I'm fresh into being on my own and working with clients. I don't want to misrepresent that I've got all these clients or have been doing it for decades or anything like that. And the area, Jason, that and we talked about this offline, that I'm actually leaning into right now is specifically email marketing. So we've had a great conversation about product and sales and all this other kind of stuff. But the area that I see the most opportunity for these small and mid-market distributors is specifically around email marketing, for a ton of reasons that we can get into. But when I'm going in, and this is where I've been spending my time working with distributors and auditing their email marketing program, the first thing is, are you even sending marketing emails? Because most of them are just sending transactional emails. Within a D2C, you can probably guess what they're doing with their email marketing. And with these B2B distributors, it's, oh, you're not even gathering email addresses. Okay, that's probably a good place to start. You got millions of visitors on your site and you're not even capturing that. So yeah, we have a 7-point audit. Me and a partner that we work through when we're working with these brands, and you nailed it. First of all, obviously, are you sending emails? Second, want to understand what are those emails producing for you? Are they opens and clicks or vanity metrics, but they are helpful to just understand, are these even hitting the inbox? Because you might be sending a bunch of emails, but they're not hitting the inbox. They're hitting spam. They're not getting delivered. And at that point, might as well just stop wasting your time. And so that's kind of the first thing that we start with is metrics, just taking a big landscape view of what's actually happening within email. And that usually unveils some other issues with marketing that we can either give back to them or figure out how we might want to approach it. The second is like this idea of consistent engagement. So are you sending emails regularly? Are you segmenting your audience? Are you talking to them frequently in a way that's building a relationship and not just sending and selling transactional crap? The third is list growth and segmentation. So like I mentioned, I was talking to a distributor last Friday and they get millions of visitors to their site. They're in a pretty competitive niche with a couple of really big players. And I'm not going to out the brand because I actually respect a lot of what they're doing. But they told me they don't gather emails. And I just referenced that a couple minutes ago. They have a little thing on their footer. I entered my name and I never got anything. And they said, yeah, we don't really do much with that because you're probably not our customer. And I said, you have no way of knowing that. Like you have absolutely zero way of knowing.
That's a massive assumption.
Huge assumption. And they took a small segment of 300 to 500 subscribers who were not purchasers and made a bunch of assumptions based on the fact that they don't buy. I'm like, that's such a small cross section of your email list. And so you're getting millions of people to your site. By the way, you're paying a lot of money to get those people to your site, and then you're not doing anything with them when they arrive. So that's that idea of list growth and segmentation. It's really important to understand, are we growing and building our list and capturing the traffic that's on our site that the rest of the marketing team or the sales team is driving? So that's the third biggest area. Transactional emails are another opportunity where you can grow the brand and improve the value that you're providing. It's not just thanks for your purchase, order number 1, 2, 3, 4. Like you can actually build a relationship using transactional emails. Then we dig into, I'll breeze through the rest of these, but automations and flows. Like, are you actually sending automated emails, or are you just once a week just firing off a campaign to your entire list? You want to meet people where they're at on their buying journey. And so an automation and a flow is a really great way to do that. And then the last two that we focus on when we're auditing is relationship building. So is your content actually adding value to the customer? Great opportunity for companies that sell services to be able to do that. And then the last piece is list health. Are you actually managing your list? Are you nurturing that list? Are you removing unsubscribes? So there's a blend of technical, there's a blend of performance, and then there's a blend of content. And again, that bleeds into all areas of marketing, because if we find issues there, chances are we're going to find issues in other parts of your marketing funnel. But email, I think, is a really great and easy thing to grab onto with a lot of low-hanging fruit for distributors.
Man, I couldn't agree more. And I'm guessing that the vast majority of the time you are in these scenarios, because most distributors are going to have a CRM of some variety, whether they're running a NetSuite or they're running a standalone CRM like a Salesforce or something like that. They usually have some form of a CRM in the business. And I'm guessing that even if they don't have an email platform or an email management platform or marketing automation or a CDP platform, that kind of your first point of call is, what do we have in our CRM? How is it broken down? And how can we extract meaningful data out of that we then can use as a springboard for doing some really effective email and retention marketing?
A lot of these distributors are using MailChimp, which kind of blows my mind. First of all, I didn't know that it was still around. RIP MailChimp, I'm sorry. But it's not an e-com tool. Like, it's not built for e-commerce. And so even if you're using, I have my own challenges with Klaviyo, but Klaviyo is a good tool. Like, it's built for e-commerce. If you're on Shopify, it's a great platform. There's issues around account-based marketing, and it's tough to get contacts versus companies. Like, I acknowledge all of that. But if nothing else, being able to know what that customer ordered and attribute revenue back to a campaign or a flow, that's the bar. That's like the minimum that you should be settling for. And so I see a lot of folks that are just using MailChimp. There's no real customer data that's flowing into it from the ERP. So they're not appending customer purchase history. They're not appending orders. There's no site level data. Like, are they coming onto our website? Right. And so even tools like HubSpot at least give you some of that, right? They give you some idea of what that contact is doing. So I think that's typically what I see is that the ESP or the CRM is disjointed from the ERP or whatever their core source of truth is, because it's expensive and it's challenging to integrate those tools. But it's really hard to have your marketing funnel operate on an island and not have any idea of what else is happening in the business. If you're using MailChimp, please get off MailChimp and use something different that actually will help your business. But I think that's what's really common is the tech tools are so disjointed from one another.
Couldn't agree more. Listen, mate, an hour is absolutely blown by. I have so much respect for you. You've done such a great job in bringing some of these key issues for distributors to light through your content. I think you're on day 300 or something, or day 200 or something of a post a day to LinkedIn. So I encourage everybody to go follow you on LinkedIn. I'll, of course, drop that into the show notes as well as your all the ways to contact you. But other than LinkedIn, what is the best way for these distributors that maybe want to learn more, maybe want to have a conversation with you around email, and maybe even just a more holistic look at what they're doing collectively across their marketing and funnel design and all that? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Let me answer that. But the first thing I want to say, because I don't want to miss it, is when I left my job, I was sitting in my nursery upstairs holding my son for a nap. And by the way, I left the job not having any clients. Like, what an idiot, right? I have a 2-month-old and I'm like, what am I doing? But I remember getting on LinkedIn and I searched B2B e-commerce and Justin King's name popped up. And then either above it or below it was Jason Greenwood. And so I think the first message that I sent you was, I felt this is a little weird to say, but in my role as a CRO, I felt pretty lonely. There was not many people who were talking about this stuff. There wasn't resource, like at least I couldn't find them. And maybe it was just because I was so head down. And so when I jumped in and I saw what you were posting and I saw the longevity in which you've been doing it, right? I don't know when this is going to come out, but you've recently passed 500 episodes. Like, what an incredible accomplishment. And so I just want to say that to acknowledge, like, tons of respect for you, and not just what you've done, because surely this has helped you personally, but more than that, it's helped the industry. And so I'm really grateful for your contribution, and just honored that I can hang out with your audience for an hour or whatever. So thank you. To connect with me, LinkedIn is the best way to do that. But then my site, Kyler Nixon, Kyler, and then Nixon, like the president, no relation, thankfully, is the other place to schedule a call or reach out.
Love it. So it's just KylerNixon.com.
KylerNixon.com. Yep, you got it.
Love it. Amazing stuff. I'll make sure and get that all into the show notes. But now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you.
Yeah.
I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like, personal or professional.
Oh,
Mr. Kyler Nixon,
yes.
What is your question for me today?
Okay. I want to know because we've talked about 10, 15 years a lot, and I'm so curious I've seen some of your content about this is what I see coming down the pipe, and we talk about that a lot, but I'm really curious about what that maybe nobody else either believes or nobody else fully understands, or people think you're a little bit crazy when you bring it up, that you see in the industry 5 to 10 years from now. And I'll leave that broad because I'm just curious what comes to mind initially for you.
Yeah, I think you and I are pretty aligned in the sense that I think the lines between manufacturers and distributors are going to not only blur, but almost entirely go away within the next decade.
Yeah.
I think that market forces will require it because historically, the distribution has survived for the last 100+ years on the back of monopolies, and monopolies in every step of the supply chain.
Yeah.
Monopolies on the manufacturing side, monopolies on exclusives. So distributors would say, I'm the exclusive distributor for this product, and if you want it, you got to come to me to get it.
Yeah.
And so the only thing they really had to do, they didn't really have to do any marketing. They didn't really have to be channel agnostic. They basically forced the customer to buy through them how they wanted to sell, and at the rates with the MOQs they wanted to sell at, and at the price they wanted to sell at, because they were the exclusive source of these products.
Yeah.
Now, that entire monopoly model has started to break down. And it started to break down in many respects because manufacturers got wise to the fact that in an exclusive distributorship model, there is no competition for giving better service, doing things better. They have no incentive to build their business in a better, smarter way.
Right.
So they realized, geez, we need to have our distributors in the market competing against each other to bring a better experience to the buyer of our products. That's the first thing. Second thing is tariffs, regional changes, COVID, supply chain difficulties, all that stuff completely removed any remaining vestiges of exclusivity because buyers were like, I just need to get this product. I don't care where I get it from, how I get it to me, whether it's air, sea, carrier pigeon, and I almost don't care what I pay for it. I just need this product for my projects, my jobs, and for my customers. And COVID really accelerated that move to really fluid and dynamic supply chains and not relying on such just-in-time scenarios across the world. And a lot of reshoring, nearshoring has happened. And I think that one of the things that stands out to me now that I live in Mexico is that Mexico is going to supplant China, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years, particularly for American brands. I think Mexico has a really good shot at supplanting China as the primary sourcing country for both raw materials and finished goods.
Fascinating. Makes sense.
So that's my take.
Fascinating. I love it. Okay, so I'm going to break the rules. I want to ask you one more question. Personal question now. Okay, so you're in Mexico now. Let's say you got to pick up and move. You got to move to anywhere in the world. Can't be Mexico. Can't be the United States. Maybe can't be New Zealand because I see you talk about that. I'm not sure if you've lived there or not, but I feel like I
lived there for almost 30 years before moving to Mexico.
So those are your 3 off limits. So where are you going next? You got to pick somewhere.
It would probably be somewhere else in LATAM, possibly Panama, possibly Peru. There's a few other countries, maybe Brazil, but
you're just going further south. You're like, I'm just going to go further south.
Exactly. Maybe my wife's Asian.
Okay.
So possibly somewhere in Asia. We would consider somewhere maybe Thailand or Vietnam. We both love Dubai. Actually, no, I take that back. It would be Dubai.
Okay.
We both love Dubai. We spend a bit of time there. We think it's a super cool country. They're really pro-business. It's super clean. It's actually far more welcoming to Westerners than many people think it would be. And if you haven't been there and you haven't spent time there, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't think, because it's a predominantly Muslim country, you wouldn't think it was that necessarily hospitable to Westerners, white Westerners. But it absolutely is. And so, I think Dubai would probably be first on our list.
I love it. That's a great answer.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.